time. All right, so it's Conversations with God, Conversations with God study group time, everybody. So for those of you tuning in, this is not free reading, so I'm not doing free readings at this hour. That was the last hour. This is our study group time. So if you're tuning in and wanting to participate in the study group, feel free to do so. What I do is essentially read passages from a book depending on the day and what book we're focusing on. And today's Friday, so on Fridays we do Conversations with God by Neil Donald Walsh, and so that's the book that we'll be discussing and talking about. And what I do is I basically read passages, and then I may stop and comment or give my own commentary about certain areas, certain concepts and ideas that are expressed. I try to break it down and make it easier to grasp and understand, so that way you can take the information and use it to your advantage. And I try to offer examples, because most people, when you talk about something as like an out there thing, like an idea, a lot of people don't always understand how to take that idea and incorporate it or use it in their actual lives. And that's what I try to teach. I try to teach by example. So I try to give you an example of a situation I've encountered, or a situation I've seen or experienced, that can help you to understand how that idea or that principle or practice is exemplified in real life. Because being spiritual in idea and in philosophy and in theory is one thing, which is easy to do. Being a practicing spiritual person, exemplifying it and actually using it in your life is a completely different thing altogether. So it's important to be able to implement what you learn, especially if you're trying to grow and evolve spiritually. So this is our study group time. So if you're chiming in and you're trying to get a free reading, or you're trying to ask a personal question, sorry, that was in the last hour. So everything for this hour will be study group. So sorry guys if you're asking for a personal reading or for connection with spirit. Now you may ask me questions regarding the topic or the subject matter, because that is what this hour is for. We are studying this book, we are studying the material, we are studying the philosophy. So if you have questions you would like to ask pertaining to the topic, or the specific elements that come up as I read, feel free to ask. And now, before I get off, I will go through and see what you guys are asking about, and then I'll try to answer as many of the questions as I can. Okay. There was someone in the last. There was someone in the last live. Not today, but the last study group, which was Wednesday. I think it was August. August. I think that the name was August. And they asked me a question, and I noticed it after I got off. So if they jump back on here, I'll answer the question. But they had asked me if everybody could, because people want to know, like, how do you develop this ability? Which I've shared that several times. Practice. You have to practice to develop this ability, and whenever you want to build yourself up to a certain level, which the individual was asking me on Wednesday, I know that we can develop this ability, but can we develop it to your skill level? And what I say to that, and actually what's interesting about this, I had a conversation with a gentleman a couple of weeks ago, and he asked me on his reading, he said, how do you do this? And I said, well, it just depends. I said, not every psychic is the same. There are psychics who are not very well trained, and they have to kind of muddle along through their own experience. And then there are psychics who actually are trained or go through a training period, and that really takes them to the next level. But you also have to have good training as well, because having just training with someone who's not a great psychic doesn't really help you to develop your skill set. But the question was, can everybody develop to your level? And my answer to that is yes and more. Yes, because I don't consider myself like the top tier of psychics. I actually consider myself an adequate psychic. I mean, what I was talking about with the gentleman is, he asked me, he says, really? I was like, yeah, I don't consider myself the top of the tier. I just consider myself to be a pretty decent or good psychic. And he says, well, what, like, from 1 to 10, like, what do you consider yourself? And I'm like, well, honestly, I said, most of the psychics that I have encountered or experienced in the industry, they're only at like a 1 or 2, maybe a 3. I consider myself to be at a 4 or 5. So I only consider myself to be just a little bit above that. Some of the best psychics in the industry, I would put them at like this, like at a 7 or like at an 8. Like John Edwards. John Edwards, I would definitely put it like at a 7 or 8, more so on an 8, just because he's done it so long. Um, when Sylvia Brown was around in her prime, because over time I think she just overworked. She worked herself to death, and when people work themselves to death, they burn out, and they don't put as much intention or energy into the quality of the work. So I think over time she just burnt out, and it was harder for her. But I feel with Sylvia, I feel she was also at the top of her tier as well, and she was also at the same level 7 or 8 when she was in her prime, when she was at like the top of her level. So there are other psychics as well. People like Teresa Caputo, people like Tyler Henry, I put them also at like a 5 or 6. I actually give them like a 6 just because they have way more experience being out there in the public and dealing with that. That's a whole nother skill altogether. Being psychic and being a medium is one thing. Being in the public eye and having to deal with a large amount of people and having boundaries and stuff, that is a whole nother ball game. When it comes to that, they're much higher than like at a 6 or 7. But I put them at like a 6 or 7 because I've seen their work and I know what they're capable of. So I definitely feel like they're not as developed as, like, I would say John Edwards or Sylvia when she was in her prime. But there's two different things, because she was more of a psychic, he's more of a medium. So, but yeah, I only put myself at like at a 5, maybe a 6. But I want to be a 10. That's my goal. My goal is to be a 10, and I want to make people 11s. That's my goal. I want to be a 10. I want to make people 11s, just because everyone that I teach or everyone that I try to give guidance to, as far as developing and using the practices and using the challenges and so forth, that's my way of trying to push people past that, like level 1 or 2, because most of the psychics in the industry that I've encountered are only level 1 and 2. And that's because they had to self-train. People who have to self-train, you don't have the luxury of all of these tips and tricks and things that you learn from each other. And in the psychic community, there's a lot of pageantry. In other words, there's a lot of competitiveness. It's almost like beauty queens. Like when you have beauty queens vying for, number one, they're like, some of them are willing to do whatever, and they do, they're crappy to each other, they're shitty to each other. It's the same thing in the psychic industry. There's a lot of psychics. Most of the psychics that I've met are very, very much very intimidated, or they feel like your competition. And I'm just like, there's like billions of people on the planet. I'm pretty sure there are plenty of people. You don't have to worry about your business going away. If your business goes away because another psychic came along, then you probably weren't that great to begin with. So if you're a good psychic and you establish a good reputation and you're decent with people and you're honest, you're probably going to hold on to a clientele base for a long period of time. All right, so let's get started. So let's talk about Conversations with God, because that's what we're here for. So this book is about this gentleman. His name is Neil Donald Walsh, and the topic of the book is essentially his expressing and connecting with source, or with God. And so he was not getting out of life what he wanted. He'd already tried. He'd been homeless for several years in Houston and Dallas and those areas. And so he finally got back to having a stable life where he had an apartment and he was able to pay his bills and food and stuff. He wasn't homeless. He wasn't eating out of dumpsters anymore. And he just still wasn't happy. He still didn't feel satisfied with life. It's like, what is it going to take to be happy? And so I think out of his anger and out of his resentment and feeling of victimization, he started having it out with God one night in the middle of the night. And in his expression and in his desire to want to know more, he started to have a dialogue. And he heard a voice in his mind, which is very similar to, and I understand it because I've gone through I have these same experiences with Aja, and then I also had the same experiences growing up as well. So it's your voice. It's your internal voice that is communicating across ideas and theories and etc. So it's just your voice, but it's just in your head, and it's expressing information that you don't fully consciously understand right away. So there's two different channels. And so he was having this conversation with God, and God was responding back, and they started to have a dialogue, which is why it's called Conversations with God. But they talk about all kinds of things. And so that's what the book is about. So I'm on chapter 11. I'm on page 140. So I'm going to pick up right there where I left off. So every time I speak as Neil, I will say Neil, and then I'll read what he's saying. And then every time I speak as God, I'll say God, and then I'll read what is said. Neil, I'd like to get back to my list of questions. There's so much more detail I want to go into on every one of these. We could do a whole book on relationships alone, and I know that, but then I'd never get to my other questions. God, there'll be other times, other places, even other books. I'm with you. Let's move on. We'll come back to it here if we have time. Neil. Okay, my next question then, why can't I ever seem to attract enough money in my life? Am I destined to be forever scrimping and scraping? What is blocking me from realizing my full potential regarding money? God. The condition is manifested not just by you, but by a great many people. Neil. Everyone tells me it's a problem of self-worth, a lack of self-worth. I've had a dozen New Age teachers tell me that lack of anything is always traceable to lack of self-worth. God. That is a convenient simplification. In this case, your teachers are wrong. You do not suffer from a lack of self-worth. Indeed, your greatest challenge all your life has been to control your ego. Some have said it's been a case of too much self-worth. Neil. Well, here I am, embarrassed and shireened again. But you are right. God, you keep saying you're embarrassed and shireened every time I simply tell you the truth. I simply tell the truth about you. Embarrassment is the response of a person who still has an ego investment in how others see him. Invite yourself to move past that. Try a new response. Try laughter. Neil. Okay. God. Self-worth is not your problem. You are blessed with an abundance of it. Most people are. You all think very highly of yourself, as rightly you should. So self-worth for the great mass of the people is not the problem. Neil, what is? God, the problem is lack of understanding of the principle of abundance together, usually with a massive misjudgment about what is good and what is evil. Let me give you an example. Neil, please do. God, you carry a thought around that money is bad. You also carry a thought around that God is good. Bless you. Therefore, in your thought system, God and money do not mix. Neil, well, in a sense, I guess that's true. That is how I think. God, this makes things interesting because this then makes it difficult for you to take money for any good thing. I mean, if a thing is judged very good by you, you value it less in terms of money. So the better something is, i.e., the more worthwhile, the less money it's worth. You are not alone in this. Your whole society believes this. So your teachers make a pittance and your strip teasers a fortune. Your leaders make so little compared to sports figures, and they feel they have to steal to make up the difference. Your priests and your rabbis live on bread and water while you throw coins at entertainers. Think about it. Everything on which you place a high intrinsic value, you insist must come cheaply. The lonely research scientist seeking a cure for AIDS goes begging for money, while the woman who writes a book on 100 new ways to have sex and creates tapes and weekend seminars to go with it makes a fortune. This having it all backwards is a propensity with you, and it stems from it stems from wrong thought. The wrong thought is your idea about money. You love it, and yet you say it is the root of all evil. You adore it, and yet you call it filthy lucre. You say that a person is filthy rich, and if a person does become wealthy doing good things, you immediately become suspect. You make them wrong. So a doctor had better not make too much money, or had better learn to be discreet about it. And a minister, whoa, She'd really better not make lots of money, assuming you'll even let a she be a minister, or they'll surely be in trouble. You see, in your mind, a person who chooses the highest calling should get the lowest pay. Neil, God, yes, is right. You should think about that because it is such wrong thought. God, Neil, I thought there was no such thing as wrong or right. God, there isn't. There is only what serves you and what does not. The terms right and wrong are relative terms, and I use them that way when I use them at all. Let me repeat that because I don't understand that. The terms right and wrong are relative terms, and I use them that way when I use them at all. In this case, relative to what serves you, relative to what you say you want. Your money thoughts are wrong thoughts. Remember, thoughts are creative. So if you think money is bad, yet think yourself good, well, you can see the conflict. Now you, in particular, my son, act out of this race consciousness in a very big way. For most people, the conflict is not nearly so enormous as for you. Most people do what they hate for a living, so they don't mind taking money for it. Bad for the bad, so to speak. But you love what you do with the days and times of your life. You adore the activities with which you crammed them. For you, therefore, to receive large amounts of money for what you do would be, in your thought system, taking bad for the good, and that is unacceptable to you. You'd rather starve than take filthy lucre for pure service, as if somehow the service loses its purity if you take money for it. So here we have this real ambivalence about money. Part of you rejects it, and part of you resents not having it. Now the universe doesn't know what to do about that, because the universe has received two different thoughts from you. So your life with regard to money is going to go in fits and starts, because you keep going in fits and starts about money. You don't have a clear focus, you're not really sure what's true for you, and the universe is just a big Xerox machine. It simply produces multiple copies of your thoughts. Now there's only one way to change all that. You have to change your thought about it. Neil, how can I change the way I think? The way I think about something is the way I think about something. My thoughts, my attitudes, my ideas were not created in a minute. I have to guess they are the result of years of experience, a lifetime of encounters. You are right about the way I think about money, but how do I change that? God. This could be the most interesting question in the book. The usual method for creation for most human beings is a three-step process involving thought, word, and deed or action. First comes thought, idea, the initial concept. Then comes word. Most thoughts ultimately form themselves into words, which are often then written or spoken. This gives added energy to the thought, pushing it out into the world, where it can be noticed by others. Finally, in some cases are put into action, and you have what you call a result, a physical world manifestation of what all stated with a thought. Everything around you in your man-made world came into being in this way, or some variation of it. All three creation centers were used. But now comes the question, how to change a sponsoring thought? Yes, that is a very good question, and a very important one, for if humans do not change some of their sponsoring thoughts, humankind could doom itself to extinction. The most rapid way to change a root thought or sponsoring idea is to reverse the thought, word, deed process. Neil, explain that. God, do the deed that you want to have the new thought about. Then say the words that you want to have your new thought about. Do this often enough and you'll train the mind to think a new way. Neil, train the mind, isn't that like mind control? Isn't that just like mental manipulation? God, do you have any idea how your mind came up with the thoughts it now has? Do you not know that your world has manipulated your mind to think as you do? Wouldn't it be better for you to manipulate your mind than for the world to? Would you not be better off to think the thoughts you want to think than those of others? Are you not better armed with creative thoughts than with reactive thoughts? Yet your mind is filled with reactive thoughts, thought that springs from the experience of others. Very few of your thoughts spring from self-produced data, much less self-produced preferences. Your own root thought about money is a prime example. Your thought about money, it is bad, runs directly counter to your experience. It's great to have money. So you have to run around and lie to yourself about your experience in order to justify your root thought. You are so rooted in this thought, it never occurs to you that your idea about money may be inaccurate. So now what we are up to is coming up with some self-produced data. And that is how we change a root thought and cause it to be your root thought, not another's. You have one more root thought about money, by the way, which I've yet to mention. Neil, what's that? God, that there's not enough. In fact, you have this root thought about about everything. There's not enough money. There's not enough time. There's not enough love. There's not enough food, water, compassion in the world. Whatever there is, that's good. There's just not enough. This race consciousness of not enoughness creates and recreates the world as you see it. Neil, okay, so I have two root thoughts, sponsoring thoughts to change about money. God, oh, at least two, probably many more. Let's see. Money is bad. Money is scarce. Money may not be received for doing God's work. That's a big one with you. Money is never given freely. Money doesn't grow on trees, when in fact it does. Money corrupts. God, I see. I've got a lot of work to do. Neil, yes, you do. If you're not happy with your present money situation, on the other hand, it's important to understand that you're unhappy with your present money situation because you're unhappy with your present money situation. Neil, sometimes you're hard to follow. God, sometimes you're hard to lead. Neil, say, listen, you're the God here. Why don't you just make it easy to understand? Neil, I have made it easy to understand. I'm sorry, God, I have made it easy to understand. Neil, then why don't you just cause me to understand if that's what you really truly want? God, I truly want you to. Oh God, this is like totally twisting my mouth here. I truly want what you truly want, nothing different and nothing more. Don't you see that is my grandest gift to you? If I wanted for you, and by the way, he's not going to make him just understand, because why would he? We're all on this journey reading this book. We're all gaining from this experience. What purpose does it serve to just make Neo understand without actually talking him through it and walking him through it? So it serves a purpose. Back to this. So then why don't you just cause me to understand if that's what you truly want? God, I truly want what you truly want, nothing different and nothing more. Don't you see that it is my grandest gift to you? If I wanted for you something other than that, than what you want for yourself, and then went so far as to cause you to have it, then where is your free choice? How can you be a creative being if I am dictating what you shall be, do, and have? My joy is in your freedom, not your compliance. Neil, okay, what did you mean? I'm unhappy with my money situation because I'm unhappy with my money situation. God, you are what you think you are. It's a vicious cycle when the thought is a negative one. You've got to find a way to break out of the circle. So much of your present experience is based on your previous thought. Thought leads to experience, which leads to thought, which leads to experience. This can produce constant joy when the sponsoring thought is joyous. It can and does produce continual hell when the sponsoring thought is hellacious. The trick is to change sponsoring thought. I was about to illustrate how to do that. Neil, go. God, thank you. The first thought to do is reverse the thought word deed paradigm. Do you remember the old adage, think before you act? Neil, yes. God, well, forget it. If you want to change a root thought, you have to act before you think. Example, you're walking down the street and come across an old lady begging for quarters. You realize she's a bag lady and is living day to day. You instantly know that as little money as you have, you surely have enough to share with her. Your first impulse is to give her some change. Then there's even a part of you that's ready to reach in your pocket for a little folding money at 1 or even at 5. What the heck? Make it a grand moment for her. Light her up. Then thought comes in. What are you crazy? What are you crazy? We've only got $7 to get us through the day. You want to give her a 5, so you start fumbling around for that one. Thought again. Hey, come on. You don't have that many of these that you can just give them away. Give her some coins, for heaven's sake, and let's get out of here. Quickly, you reach into the other pocket to try to come up with some quarters. Your fingers feel only nickels and dimes. You're embarrassed. Here you are, fully clothed, fully fed, and you're going to nickel and dime this poor woman who has nothing. You try in vain to find a quarter or two. Oh, there's one deep in the fold of your pocket. But by now, you've walked past her, smiling wanly, and it's too late to go back. She gets nothing. You get nothing either. Instead of the joy of knowing your abundance and sharing, you now feel as poor as the woman. Why didn't you just give her the paper money? It was your first impulse, but your thought got in the way. Next time, decide to act before you think. Give money. Go ahead. You've got it. And there's more where that came from. That's the only thought which separates you from the bag lady. You're clear there's more where that came from, and she doesn't know that. When you want to change a root thought, act in accordance with the new idea you have. But you must act quickly, or your mind will kill the idea before you know it. I mean that literally. The idea, the new truth, will be dead in you before you've had a chance to know it. So act quickly when the opportunity arises, and if you do this often enough, your mind will soon get the idea. It will be your new thought. Neil. Oh, I just got something. Is that what's meant by the new thought movement? God, if not, it should be. New thought is your only chance. It's your only real opportunity to evolve, to grow, to truly become who you really are. Your mind is right now filled with old thoughts. Not only old thoughts, but mostly someone else's old thoughts. It's important now, it's time now to change your mind about some things. This is what evolution is all about. And that's the end of that chapter. Love it. So I got some examples here and some tricks for y'all because I had to go through this process to change my relationship with money. And it was not an easy process. I had to do it for several years actually because it took that long to train me and recondition me out of the poverty mindset because I grew up in poverty. So I grew up, my mom was on welfare, and we only got a few $100s a month to pay for everything, our bills and stuff like that. And even back then when we were dealing with that was still not enough. But we also had food stamps. We had to use food stamps, and we had to live using government help and government aid. We had to learn. We had to be very careful with our spending. We didn't have money to just spend. And so I had to train myself out of that mindset because I was so conditioned to poverty and so conditioned to that cyclical pattern of lack. There's not enough. I got to be careful because this $1, I can't spend it. If I spend this $1, then I won't have another dollar. It'll be gone, and that'll be it. Something will be reduced of me. Something will leave me. Something will go away. And so it's not an easy pattern to break, but you can totally break it. So here's a few things that I used to do that would help me to break the pattern. I wouldn't recommend doing all of these because some of you, there's a difference between acting out of faith which is what essentially we're being taught here, and acting out of ignorance that is self what is it, self-destructive or self-sabotaging. So you have to act out of faith without it being self-sabotaging, and it's a very fine line. And so, for example, back when I was back in Houston, this was years ago, because life has changed a lot for me since I was doing this. But I would years ago I would when you get paid through Starbucks, you only make so much money, etc. And so what I would do is I would just take a $20 bill or a $40 bill, and I would break it up into ones, and I would try to give out as many ones as I could during that pay cycle. And so I would keep a bunch of $1 bills in my little, like, the vehicle, the little whatever the thing, that little crap door thing that opens. I forgot the what you call it. Anyways, the pocket thing. But I would keep the money there. And so every time I saw a homeless person, or every time I saw someone who didn't have food or anything, I would give them a few bucks. Sometimes it was just one. Sometimes I would give them two or three, because I had to condition myself. And even just giving people two or three, like giving money away, is one of the hardest things people have to overcome. Because if I tell you, go out and just give a $20 bill to a random stranger, you're not going to be able to do it. Most people can't, because it goes so against their belief. I just busted my ass for money. I'm not going to just go and give a random person who hasn't even done anything for me a $20 bill. But that's exactly what I'm saying. Because if you start to get to a place where you start to take away the value and worth of money, and don't see it as something that is the root of your survival, and instead see it as a resource for energy. If you see money as energy and not as your life, it changes money for you. It will change money for you, but you have to be consistent with your thinking. And so when I would, stop at a stoplight, or I would go through or whatever, and I saw someone who needed money, I would just give them $1 or give them a few bucks. And I wouldn't think about it, and I would try to avoid thinking about it. I would just do it, and I would thank God for giving me the chance to be able to do so. Because I obviously wasn't starving to death myself. I obviously wasn't living on the street. That person was. And so I could afford to give them a few bucks. Now, granted, yeah, you could think into it, oh, well, those people, they're just going to go and drink alcohol or buy alcohol or beer or this or that. That was not my concern. My concern was practicing the shifting of my relationship with money, not focused on being so invested in what I was giving someone that I had to follow them back into their lives to figure out what they were going to do with that. That's not my job. My job is to offer, not to follow people and to control what is happening beyond what I've gifted or what I've given. And so that was what I was trying to do. When I was building up my business in the beginning year, I didn't have clients. I was barely online. I had maybe one review. I was not very well known. And so I just started giving away free sessions. And I gave away a lot of free sessions just because I needed to feel like I was working, and I wanted to feel like I was helping people. And so I just started doing it for free. And so in that, as I started doing it for free, and I had specific people that I was giving away sessions to. But as I was giving sessions away to people, they would send people to me, but they would have to pay, because the free session was only for a certain amount of people. I wasn't just going to be doing things for free forever. I had to also make a living. I was trying to leave Starbucks. I was trying to build a business, and I was trying to find a more happier, fulfilling state of being in my work and in my career. So I had to make money off of my business, and that was the only way it was going to happen. So I had to make my business sound, and I had to start to pull away from Starbucks. But the only way to do that was to actually charge money for services. But I didn't charge everybody. I did a lot of free. I still do a lot of free stuff as well. People don't realize how much stuff I do for free, but I do a lot of free stuff too. But anyways, so that has never been, that's actually been a thing that I've made sure that I kept with and that I've stuck with. Whatever I do in this world, whatever I produce in this world, if I'm going to earn revenue from some of the work that I do, there has to be a large percentage that I give away or that I donate in some way, shape, or form. This is one of the reasons I do the lives. This is one of the reasons why I offer my services for free to families or police officers who have missing persons cases and family members who are missing, for the families. So there's reasons why I do certain things for free, because it's part of my recipe. If you're gonna going to do anything that has a huge impact in this world, you have to give from a place of love, not just from a place of gain. And if you're doing everything to just gain and gain and gain for yourself, then you're not here for the world, you're here for you. And if you're only here for you, you've basically disconnected from the rest of the world, which is God. God is the world. And so at that point, you're only focused on self and not on the grand being, not on the grand love of God, not on God. You're not giving to God. And so that's part of my equation. And so like when I do some of the meetings with like my team, you know, we all eat at a Mexican restaurant, and for the whole family and everybody, it was only $70. Like that's like, you know, it at the time it felt like, oh my God, I'm paying $70 for everybody's food. But you know, now it's not really. I don't think that way. You know, now I've worked myself up to where if I want to really treat people, I will treat people. And so it's different because it forces me to totally not even give one moment's thought to something that by default you might automatically have a reaction to, like so like. And I really pushed myself, you know. We went to one restaurant. It was myself, my sister, her fiance, my cousin and her husband, and then my other two cousins, I think. And I was like, you know, hey, you know, and they didn't know I was going to pay for it. I went in there and I was just like, I don't care how much it costs, I'm going to pay for it. And I'm not even going to look at the price. I'm just going to tip accordingly, and I'm going to pay for it. And it turned into like a $400 meal for everybody. And I paid for it. And I was like, I got it. I'm good. And then I tipped the waiter way more than I should have tipped, but that's fine because I could do it. But, you know, it's not like I was going out every freaking weekend or every freaking day. I went out maybe once or twice a month. And so you do the math, you know. Would I rather go out once a week and pay, you know, 20 or 40 to eat out? Or would I rather save that money and take everybody out, have everybody enjoy their meal, and pay a shitload of money for one really solid good like helping? And and it was sushi, which is why it was expensive as well. It was like a you know, those places where they have those where they're always doing those grill things, and then they had sushi as well. But it was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it. And this is where it gets funny because I, by default, I am not comfortable. I was not comfortable. I am now. I was not comfortable with being treated by others. I wasn't comfortable with someone paying for my stuff because by default, it made me feel like I was poor. Like someone had to take care of me or someone had to cover the bill because I couldn't afford it. That's how I felt by default when someone would offer to pay and treat me. What ended up happening over time is, and thanks to my good friend, my best friend Carla, because my best friend Carla's loaded, but she came from the hood just like I did, and she ran into the same issues, and so she married into wealth, and she had to teach herself how to she married into wealth. She had to teach herself how to blend with the people on that level, and we're talking about millionaires and multimillionaires and people who are well known and famous. And so she had to get comfortable being in the public, being in those kinds of scenarios where she was dealing with people who had quite a bit of money. And for her, it was an uncomfortable place to be in because she came from the hood. But she had to because she loved her husband and she wanted to be supportive, and she didn't want him to run into challenges with trying to mix the two worlds together. So she taught herself how to be this person who doesn't struggle or have concerns about money. She had to teach herself. She had to go through this whole conditioning period as well. And so when we became friends, she started wanting to treat me because even though it's not like I needed to be treated all the time, I definitely wasn't in a position where I could afford some of the things that she could afford. And so she started treating me. And I always told them, like, don't buy me stuff. Like, I'm not a person where like I want people to buy me stuff. If people are going to gift me anything, gift me food, or gift me food, gift me books, or give me an experience. That's what I'm perfectly fine receiving. I want an experience, I want delicious food, or I want information in literature. And so that's how I prefer to have gifts, is in that way. Now sometimes people will surprise me. My partner may send me flowers, that's always a surprise because I don't expect that. But those are usually my prerequisites. If someone's going to gift me something for the Christmas or whatever, like let it be food, let it be an experience, or let it be food or experience. What was the other one? Food or experience. I forgot. My brain blanked out. Anyways, so spending more time with my best friend, she exposed me to situations where I was uncomfortable and I had to get comfortable. And one of the first situations that they exposed me to was going to, I remember the very first time I went to meet them for dinner. It was meeting her and her husband. We went to this restaurant. To me, coming from the hood, was like, this was a really nice restaurant. To them, it's like, this is casual. Like, this is casual. This isn't like an expensive restaurant. But to me, it was, because this is the world that I was coming from. I was coming from the east side. I was coming from, Second Ward. I was coming from the hood. And I remember even my clothing, my clothes, like my khaki pants were too baggy, and my shirt was, and I was a little bit heavier, and I thought that I was well dressed, but I mean, in comparison, I'm like, what was I thinking wearing that? But I was uncomfortable, and I went in, and the waiter came along, and just dealing with the waiter was very uncomfortable for me. But they, we all talked or whatever. And back then I thought I was doing very well financially because I had managed to leave Starbucks and I was finally doing my business full time. So I could afford to do my business full time and focus on my business. And so I thought I was doing pretty well. I thought I was like at the best place in my life that I ever thought I could be at, better than where I thought I could be at. And so we had some great conversations, et cetera, and we just grew closer and closer. And then after that, they started exposing me to situations where I would find myself in uncomfortable situations over and over again. And so when we all decided to take a trip to Peru, um, they wanted to give me the experience. Now, granted, I do vision boards almost every year, by the way, y'all. So there are things that I have experiences on my vision board, not things. It's nice to have things, but the experiences are what you really want to focus on. If you can focus on the embodying of an experience, the things that come along with that experience are by default going to happen. So if you're trying to, for example, be a wealthy person, but you're focusing on money, money is the consequence, is the thing that comes from being a wealthy person. Why would you focus on the money? Money is just going to be there if you're wealthy. Focus on the experience of what a wealthy person would experience. And so so one of the things on my vision boards was that I wanted to go to a world wonder, and then also that I wanted to experience first class in an airplane. And I never, and that was, this is again years ago before I went to Peru. But they gifted me, because, I paid for my ticket. I paid for my stuff. They paid for theirs. They lowered their standards a bit so that I could be comfortable with the experience of going to Peru and Machu Picchu. That's the big difference between the money difference. But they gifted me an upgrade of my plane ticket to first class. So I got a chance to ride in first class with them. It was my first time. It's been my only time so far. There'll be more because it'll come easily. But it was, because once you get used to the little egg and you get to spread your legs out and you have oh my God, like, no, it's hard to go back to like anything when you have that room and have your privacy. But they upgraded my ticket to first class because they wanted to treat me with an experience. And so I had the opportunity to experience first class. And every place we went, they always insisted on paying for dinner or paying for breakfast or paying for whatever. They were insistent on paying for everything because they're used to it, because they don't have to worry about where the money's coming from. It just is there. And so I pushed myself, and in several instances, I flipped the bill, not because I felt guilty or felt bad, because I wanted to feel like them. I wanted to feel that way. So I forced myself out of my comfort zone and said, okay, if I got to work 2 months to pay for this damn meal, I guess that's what I'm going to do. And so that's what we ended up doing. So that's pretty much, how I forced myself. So I forced myself in uncomfortable situations, but it allows me to rise to the occasion. There are other experiences that I've had being around millionaires, made me very uncomfortable. I went to this meet and greet for a nonprofit organization at Saks Fifth Avenue in the Galleria. And the idea of walking into a Saks, like when you're poor and you grow up in the hood, the idea of going into a place like that is very intimidating. It feels like as soon as you walk in, the beepers are going to go off and you're like going to be arrested for being poor because it's obvious that you don't have taste, right? That's the mindset that poor people have. And so I remember I got myself nicely dolled up. And I mean, I shop at Target. It's not like I go and buy clothes at Saks. I honestly just, I mean, now I understand the difference between quality clothing and how it's quality made versus, cheaper stuff that's made in other countries and it's made at like pennies on the dollar. I get the value of the quality with clothing. But going back to this, I was invited to this event, and it was my friend's. She was. It was something important to her cause, and to it was for a charity, which was for abused women. It was AVDA. It's called AVDA, but it's basically an organization in Houston that a bunch of attorneys they donate their time and their energy to represent women who are coming out of relationships where their husbands have basically abused them and they're going through a divorce and they're trying to keep their kids or they're trying to keep from their husband taking everything. And so these attorneys they give their free time and they represent these women and these people who are victims of abuse. And so I wanted to support her in this. This was an important cause. I wanted to support her because of my mom and having seen her go through something like this as well. And I was in sex, and being in Saks, I was uncomfortable, but I have to play it off like, oh, I'm comfortable. Whatever, wearing my Target blazer and my Target clothes. Like I was like gonna pretend like I was comfortable. Like, okay, so I walked up in there, mingled around, talked to people, etc. And this guy who's a millionaire, who is friends with who I didn't know, but he walks up to me and he's like real chatty, real chatty. And then he like looks at my jacket and then he touches my jacket. And then he's like, this is a nice jacket, or like, where did you get this? That's a nice style or whatever. And I don't know if he was being shady or if he actually just didn't know any better. And it's not like he was dressed up to the nine. He was just dressed like he just got off of work and he was tired. And so I was like, oh yeah, thank you. I said, yeah, I got it at Target. They sell them off the rack. So you can just like pull it and go and pay. And I don't think he was expecting that answer, but I think it also was entertaining. At the same time, it was kind of I guess, endearing to him. So he continued to have conversations with me for the night or whatever. But there have been situations like that where I found myself in very, very uncomfortable situations. Here in Santa Fe, one of the most expensive restaurants here, a person's meal is going to be like $400. Like that's one meal. And my friend, the first time we went to this place, she treated me, of course, because she could afford it. She treated me. And I was in this environment where there's a dress code. You have to dress a certain way, etc. But it really wasn't dress code because there were people walking up in there who they obviously had money. They didn't have to prove anything. And they were like in flip flops and shit, but they're used to it because they don't have to prove themselves to society. They just know where they come from and what their value is in that. And I wasn't. I was like super polite, trying to like, which fork am I using? Which utensil I was very uncomfortable. But I even watched the video before I went to this restaurant because I wanted to make sure I wasn't going to be like Julia Roberts and Pretty Woman making a fool of myself. But that's what I did because I told her, I was like, I don't like going to places I've never been to before. I have to do reconnaissance. So if you tell me where we're going to go, I'm going to go and look at all the pictures online. I'm going to go look. And this is the kind of anxiety that I deal with, y'all. Just so y'all know, the kind of anxiety that I deal with in life, when I'm going somewhere, I kind of want to feel like I know what I'm walking into because I want to be prepared for anything that I may deal with. That comes from being, poor. That comes from being gay. That comes from being, incessantly teased and abused as a child. So I like to know what I'm walking and getting myself into. So she's like, this is the restaurant we're going to go. And I'm like, okay, cool. And I went online and I looked at all the pictures, all the different menus. I had to know what I was walking into. And today, like, it's not the same. Like I can walk and you have to pull up. Like people don't really park themselves. You have to pull up and let the valet guy take your vehicle. And, he's dealing with these, Aston Martins and all these vehicles that they don't really sell unless you're a millionaire. You don't really buy it. It's very uncomfortable, but I got used to it. And I've gone, I think 2 times or 3 times already. The second and the third time were more easy or much more easier for me. The first time was the freaking freak out for me. But I did it. I pushed myself. And so every single time you push yourself to have a sense of what it's like to have resources and money, even if it's just a little more than what you have now, you have to practice what that would feel like. You have to practice what that's going to look like. If you don't, then you're going to limit yourself and you're going to give yourself a cutoff point. So today I feel like I'm a pretty good master manifester, and I have a pretty decent life and a good life. And sometimes I overspend, but I don't worry about the money because I'm like, oh, it'll show up, or I'll work it out. I'll figure it out somehow. So even if I overspend or I push myself past my limit, like I can work it out somehow. So I don't give myself grief over it. If I step in, because even today there are still some times where I step back into poverty mode, where I think back to when I had all this debt. I think back to when I had all these things I had to pay for. I had to think back to when my truck wasn't paid off, like all these things. And so sometimes when I get a bill, or when like my electric bill here, and it's just me using the heat sparingly during the winter time, is like $600 for like 1 month. That's an expensive as electric bill. But in the summertime, because we don't really have to use AC so much, it's only like $150, $200. It's a lot more doable. In Houston, it's like $250 every single month for a house in central AC, going up from that. But that was, but that's here. So here, when I have a moment where I have an expensive bill come up, I'm like, and I'm like, okay. But then immediately I catch myself and I'm like, no, 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 don't do that. Because that is not a reflection of what you don't have. That is a reflection of what you're capable of and what you're able to do. So pay it. And if you can't pay it right away, then do the best you can, and then work out the rest later. I'm like, okay. And so I have to talk myself out of going into that spiral of freak out mode that I don't have the money, or how am I going to pay for this, or whatever, because it will just recondition me and reassume that old energy, to bring up back that old energy, and it's not going to get me anywhere. So I know I didn't answer y'all's questions, because I've been trying to give y'all some examples of how to exemplify this, because I know this to be true. I've been able to completely transform my financial situation and what I'm able to have and do in this world, because I had to work on conditioning myself and reconditioning myself. You have these people who are like, oh, I watched The Secret, so if I just think positive and I'm going to have all this money. Well, okay, that might be possible. If you look at people like Cynthia Stanford is a woman who used law of attraction to manifest a lottery win. And today, even though she did a lot of giving and she did do a lot of philanthropy, she had to file for bankruptcy about 3 or 4 years after that. And most people who win the lottery, who are not prepared to deal with that level of wealth and don't know how to manage that in a balanced way, will find themselves poor or broke. Shortly thereafter. They won't hold on to their wealth. You have to learn what it feels like to be wealthy, and to sustain wealth, and to sustain a mindset that brings about more wealth and more money and more financial prosperity. And so that's something you have to work on. And it's taken time for me to condition myself to this point, but it works. It really does work. But you have to push yourself past your boundaries of comfort. Yes. Okay. And Cassie was like, fake it till you make it. Yes. So here's what I will say. When I was doing some of these tricks, I also did have my American Express, and I had a few thousand on there. And sometimes I would put something on the American Express so I could use the cash to conduct these experiments. So I really was kind of playing with fire a little bit. And I was like, okay, well, I'm going to do this instead. And so I had to play a little bit there, but know your limits. Know your limits. Don't go and just act like you have $5,000 and rack up $5,000 on your credit card. No, just start with a little bit of money that if you lose it that month and you can give it away, it's not going to break you. Start there and then work your way up. As you work your way up, it'll become much more, much more. And then you can do a lot more than what you've been able to do. But you have to work up to it. Don't assume that you can just like go and burn every single credit card and then think that that's going to automatically in a month or two, you're going to be able to bring in that much wealth. No. That shift is going to take much longer, and it takes an investment. That's like people who think, oh, if I just take this one psychic class, or if I read this one psychic book, after I'm done, I'm automatically a great psychic and I'm going to be at a 10. No, sweetheart. You have to put in the money and energy. You have to put in the effort and energy to be able to build your level of skill up. It's going to take time. You don't get to go to the Olympics by training for 1 hour in your entire lifetime. You have to train daily, constantly pushing yourself, constantly reaching your limits. Those of you who may not understand what this is about, here's another example. People may not know what my life is like as far as like when I get off the video or when I'm whatever, but people don't realize how much I've busted my ass. let me tell you why my level of skill is up to where it's at. And it's not like I'm perfect. I still make plenty of mistakes, but I'm damn good at what I do, and I know that I am. But this is why. Because working at Starbucks, if you got an order of 30 lattes, you got to just do it. You just got to do it. You can't really take the time to sit there and, make one drink, and no, you got to be like, oh, like you have to go into this whole machinery mode of doing it very quickly and getting through it. And that work ethic is stuck with me after I left Starbucks. So when I decided I was going to build my business, I carried that work ethic over, and I started to have like 4 clients every single day that I would be available for appointments. So I started off at 4 clients. And so for me, 4 clients was a lot. I was like, oh my God, I don't know how I'm going to get through the day. I don't have enough energy or whatever. And I had to push myself and push myself and push myself. Last year, okay, let's put it this way. The very first year that I was able to be a full-time psychic in my business, in that year, I think I had 400 or 500 appointments, like just in person or client appointments. That was just in the first year of me being a professional psychic, and no Starbucks. So all of my income, all of the money that I made came from those appointments. And so everything I had to pay for, my bills, everything came from those appointments. That was in the first year. That was like what? That was in 2004, I think. That was because I started my business. I started professionally doing stuff in 2012, but then when I got to 2004 is when I was able to leave Starbucks. So 2014, 2015, around there is when I started to do this full time. And so that first year that I was able to do it full time, I only had like 400, 500 appointments for that year. But that was a lot. For me, that was a lot because I was also, there was like 4 appointments every single time I was doing appointments. And I was working like 4 or 5 days a week. Last year, I had 1,600 client appointments. That's not taking into account all the lives that I do, because that's separate. The lives are separate. The study groups are separate. And then that's not including the e-readings that I do as well. And so last year alone, I did 1,600 appointments in the entire year. So I was doing about 50 or 60 client appointments, one-on-ones, each week. Each week. That's how much work I did. That's how much I pushed myself. And so for me, in my mind, if I'm only got 3 appointments for that week, I'm not really going to get a whole lot of practice and be able to really develop my skills. But if I have 60 appointments in a week, I can't afford to stop and like freak out over every single appointment. I just have to go from appointment to appointment to appointment to appointment. So that is what I did last year. I did about 1,600 appointments. I think I did more than that, but I think that's the number that I remember because there's more than that. I don't remember the other little numbers. 1,600 appointments, about 60 appointments a week. But I also, because I give myself plenty of downtime, I wasn't working 4 hours or 5 hours a week. I was only doing client appointments 3 days a week. But every single day, I had 10 to 15 appointments every single day. And then you add the lives, both the free live and then also the study group. And then you add the e-readings as well. So all of that, and then the free me helping with missing persons cases. So all of that in. So there were days where I didn't have client appointments, but I still had e-readings that I had to muster through. I still had missing persons cases that I needed to work on. So there was still stuff I did on the other days, but for client appointments, I only worked 3 days a week, but I did 10 to 15 appointments every single day. And then I was also doing the e-readings on the other days, etc. So it's a lot of work. That is a crap load of client appointments to have to go through. But I did it, and I'm pretty proud of myself because I'm like, holy shit, that's a lot of appointments. And that was me pushing myself to my limits. This year, if I kept going the way I was going last year, I probably was going to burn out because that was a lot. I mean, I think that was my limit. So this year, I've begun to shift the balance a little bit. So I do more e-readings. now than I was doing last year. But I also reduced the amount of appointments per day because it was just too much. I was burning through the day and I had nothing left over. So I have to find a balance, but I don't want to get weak. I don't want to get to the point where I'm only doing one appointment a day. Like that's not enough for me. I have to feel like I'm going through it. And so for me, the minimum that I'm willing to do in a day is like 4 or 5. That's a minimum. For me, the average or what I prefer is around like 7 or 8. That for me is a healthy number. And that's not including, again, the lives, the free sessions, and then also the missing persons cases and stuff. But that's it. And then, not only that, but also part of what keeps me going, part of what pushes me is the fact that last year I employed 4 people. Last year I employed 4 people. And so I wasn't just earning for myself, I was earning for these people. And we were in the pandemic and people were losing their jobs and people were not able to earn a paycheck. And so I felt a huge sense of responsibility. If people are going to book appointments and if I can work as much as I can, and if I can, funnel some of that money and that resources to giving people jobs so that they can still pay their bills and they have money flowing in, then let me do that. And that's what I did. And so I employed a few people, and I was able to pay them, and also able to keep up with it as well. So again, last year was an extreme amount of work. This year will probably be a better balance, because I have to find a balance. I have to make it through to the end of my life where I'm going to like drown in the energy that it takes to do this. But now you understand like why I tell people like you're not going to develop your psychic abilities with just like reading one book and trying one exercise. You need to do this every fucking day, hours in a day, which is what I do, which is why my ability is the way it is, because I've continued to push myself. And even when I'm not working with clients, I'm still in one way or another channeling or doing some sort of psychic work. I still post, predictions and stuff. So all of that. So that's the work. That's the work. And if you care about it, if you really want it to go somewhere, if you want to build it up, you have to drive it. You have to be an Olympian in that industry. And you're not an Olympian unless you are tired and exhausted and you feel like you're going to throw up from how much you've just done, but you did it. You did it. And I cannot tell you how often last year, after a full day's work with everything included, how I felt like throwing up because I was done and I would shut down for the rest of the night. And my partner was like, you have no personality. I'm like, nope, zero personality. I have no personality. There's a reason why my friends and my family didn't hear much from me last year, because I had zero personality, because after I was done working and giving y'all everything, there was nothing left. And I had to reserve and go into reserve mode. So, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I do. I do read some, Robin. I do read some things, but sometimes what happens is, after I'm done working, I tend to check out. I still will go on social media or I'll go and check some things because I'm just nosy like that. But so I'll go on and look at what's going on in the world or what's happening, and I'll catch up with communications between some friends and stuff. But um, sometimes when I'm looking at stuff and I see it in passing and I make a mental note, I need to come back and respond to that. I forget to respond. And then I forget that I even read something. And then I forget that it even exists. And so then I don't realize until like, oh shit, I forgot to respond to that. They're going to think I'm being rude. And it's not because I'm being rude. I literally forget to respond to things because I am moving from one thing to the next, to the next, to the next when I'm focusing and when I'm working that day. And that's what happens there. So let me see. Let me go through some of the questions here so I can see if I can catch a couple of y'all's questions before I get off here. Because I know I just talked for most of the time, but I think people needed to understand, because you have people who are like, I want to be psychic and I want to do this, but they only want to do a little bit of it. They don't really want to devote themselves to. I'm like, no, no, no. This is what devotion looks like. This is what devotion to this work and devotion to development looks like. And I'm not saying that everybody needs to be like Ferny and everybody can operate the way that I can, because I conditioned myself through all of my life, all of my years at Starbucks doing like that, because I had to be that way. But at the same time, I want every single person that I can train or at least give an advantage to be better than I can, because I want a hell of a lot more better versions of myself in my skill set than what's there now. I feel like there aren't enough psychics out there that are competent or that are really good at what they do. Um, I watch a lot of psychics. You are top tier, so it has always been ghost. Thank you, sweetheart. I appreciate that. I appreciate that, Cassie. Yeah, like I said, I consider myself a 5, maybe a 6 out of a 10. I want to get to a 10. I don't even know what that's gonna look like. I'm probably gonna be like everything that comes out of my mouth is gonna be automatically some prediction or something. Like, I don't even know what that's gonna look like if I get to a 10. But I want to see what that could be because I think we all deserve to know what we're capable of, right? Um, I do have a podcast. Alira62. I do have a podcast. Check out my website. I have a podcast. It's in season 3. I haven't recorded in a few weeks because on my days off, I've been just like chilling and enjoying my day off. And so I'm due to record one. I was due to record one a couple of weeks ago, and I just haven't gotten around to it. But I'm going to record another one or two in the next week or so, so that way I can catch up because I'm supposed to be in season 3, but I've already done 2 seasons of podcasts. So check it out. We talk about a lot of different stuff. And last year's podcast was, of course, very politically charged, and it was me and Michelle, and we had to deal with a lot of that. So there was a lot of politicalness in last year's podcast. I don't really care for politics. Before 2020, before the last few years, I rarely cared about politics at all, but it's just different times. We're living in different times, and you have to care about what's going on in the world that affects you. Yeah, yeah. Morality, to some extent, I know that look at people like Joel Osteen. He is not being paid pennies or bread. He's making quite a killing. Yeah, he's done well for himself, and he's been able to amass wealth beyond measure. Um, I would like to see a lot more community and a lot more work to support impoverished people. To support, it's enough. Yes, Jill, you can go to church on Sunday, do a great sermon, and inspire people, help people. That's fine, but take a big chunk of what is being made, and instead of buying the mansion in River Oaks, why don't you open up a few community kitchens? Why don't you help to bring down child poverty? Because the cost for that mansion that you live in each month is probably going to equal having a small center that can feed people every single day or several times a week. And I think that's a better use of the money, rather than just living in wealth and feeling blessed. I would rather do something with it than just live in wealth and feel blessed. And so that's where I struggle with that, because I'm like, you're in a position where you could really affect some things. When you think of Beyonce, people don't know this, but where I worked at in Midtown, Beyonce has several homeless shelters that she supports that she actually paid for. And that's her giving back. And a lot of these people, they give back. You just don't always hear about all of it. But if it's going to be something, what I would say is, if you're well known or if you're an established preacher, you need to make these things public, because it needs to inspire people by example. Doing it in private, yeah, you may not want to be like, oh, look, I'm going to tell everybody that I'm doing this or I'm doing that. Yeah, maybe for like an average person who doesn't really do it often and they want attention for the one good thing they did in that whole month when they're Christians and showing up. They show up more to church than they actually exemplify and do things that are represented with the Christian faith. So I would rather you show up to a homeless shelter 4 times a month and help for an hour, because that's more Christianly than showing up and being inspired by having someone tell you how to live a better life and be a better human being. I mean, I think you got to do the math here. And there's nothing wrong with being inspired, but make sure that you're doing just as much to exemplify what you're inspired to do and to exemplify the word. And so you have people like Beyonce who are doing big things, and they are donating money and helping people. And it should be public. People should know what they're doing, because it will help to inspire others to, even if they just want to be, I want to be like Beyonce, so I'm going to like open a shelter. Great, that's fine. I'm not going to complain that you opened a shelter and you're going to get attention for that. I'm not going to complain about it. These people need the help, so let's do that. And so that's where my mind is kind of like fixated on. Yeah, Cassidy, you gotta drop that. I wrestle with accepting money for doing God's work. It's an ongoing battle for me. You have to drop it. And people will make you feel so guilty, and they'll try to come for you. I've had people say, my grandmother was a well-known psychic in her area, and she believed that this was God's gift. And she said, if you charge, you're doing the devil's work. You should never charge for this gift. Does that sound familiar? And I said, Does she have a husband? Yeah, she had a husband. Did he pay the bills and she didn't have to work? Well, yeah, she didn't have to pay. She didn't have to pay for anything. He paid for everything. Oh, okay. So your grandmother was afforded, out of privilege, the opportunity to be able to sit on her ass and cast judgment on everybody and use her natural ability. And so she could say that because she's afforded that luxury. She's afforded that privilege. I was not afforded that privilege. I had to support myself and my partner. My partner doesn't have to work. He can live his life. I don't require him to work. He was going to go back into the workforce, and I was like, don't worry about it. Like, if I had someone who could pay for everything and I didn't have to work, I would be grateful for that. So I'm going to give you that. And so you don't have to work. I will support you. And so we can just enjoy our lives together, and do whatever you want with yourself. And so that's the agreement that we have. And so for myself, if you have people casting judgment, they're casting judgment because they're in a position of um, privilege where they can cast judgment and not understand what is required from this. And yes, I have quite a bit of clients, and yeah, I'm booked out, with certain types of services months in advance. Yes, I build myself up. Yes, I'm well known on social media. Yes, I have a good following. Yes, I'm able to really support myself and enjoy my life and benefit from, and really really enjoy and benefit from the work that I do. But at the same time, I'm not just sitting on my ass and just like, more money, I need more money. No, like, I'm not sitting there like trying to figure out. People keep getting on me. My partner, he's like, you need to raise your prices, and my friends are like, you're too cheap. You need to raise your prices. And I'm like, no, this has to be affordable for everybody, because I'm not here to do this for the uber wealthy or for people who have to pay $200-$300 a freaking hour with me. Like, this has to be affordable enough for people who, if they need the help, I'm gonna reach them. And so that's why I have brackets of different levels of services. So for me, it's not about the money. For me, it's about the work and the value that I'm bringing into this world with the knowledge that I have gained through this experiences. And so if I'm going to work as hard as I do, and be able to enjoy having 3 days off, having, whatever, giving myself 2 weeks off. This year, I gave myself 6 weeks off for vacation. I've never given myself like 3 weeks off in a year, because that's the old Ferny mindset, where you only get so much from your vacation and your boss is going to get mad because you took more time off. This year I was like, screw this, I'm giving myself time off. And so I gave myself 2 weeks off for my birthday, so I'm gonna be off for 2 weeks. I gave myself another week off in August, because that's like a halfway point of the year and I want to give myself a break. I gave myself another 2 weeks off for the holidays. I gave myself another week or week and a half off for going to Hawaii later this year. So I gave myself time off, and I'm going to enjoy the fruits of my labor, but I also have to give back. I still have to do the lives. I still have to do all these things. I have to be here for you guys, because that is part of the deal. And so that's part of the process. That's part of the obligation and the responsibility of being blessed. Don't just take, give back. And if you can get back more than you're able to receive, do it, because it is worth it and it is serving a grander purpose. And so just do it. But yeah, that's hard to overcome, Cassidy. But once you get into a habit of saying, like, look, I gave you an hour of my time. I don't care whether you thought that I gave you anything of value because you don't agree with what I had to say. You didn't come to me for an agreement. You can go to some of these banshees on the side of the road and ask them to agree with you, and they'll agree with you. They're going to rack up a bill on you and lie to your ass, but they'll agree with you. I'm not going to agree with you. I'm going to tell you what I see, and I appreciate your perspective and what you want to hear. I don't care. I'm going to tell you what I see, because you're paying for my time, my expertise, and how I choose to express it. So this is how I'm going to give it to you. And so for people, some people, they may spend time with me, which I actually am really grateful, because majority of my clients, I don't really have to deal with a lot of crappy clients. I think in a year, on average, I have to deal with maybe 3 experiences where clients or people are being rude or nasty to me. So 3 experiences in a year is nothing. And I'm so grateful for that, because most of my clients are incredible and great people. So I don't have to deal with it. And I put it out there. God, send me the people that I can help or that I need to be of service to. Send the crazies or the pain in the asses away. I don't need to deal with them. And so that's that's how I set it up that way. But yeah, you have to get past that, Cassidy, because if you don't value your effort and your work, and it be reflected in the resources that will support that and help that to evolve, then you're doing yourself a disservice, and you're also disrespecting the prosperity that is waiting for you to elevate you to the level that you want to get to. Yeah, beard robbing. Yeah, it's generational. Absolutely generational. Yeah, absolutely generational. Cassidy, yeah, Cassidy's talking about. Yes, I knew manifestation was happening when I had a $5 bill untouched in my car for a week. Cassidy, when you get to the level of manifesting, like you at that when you get to a certain point where you have the money and you can just go and pay for it or buy it, but you're like, okay, I'm gonna hold off because I don't feel like doing it yet, or I just don't want. I'm so lazy, I don't even want to go to the store. Then stuff happens that makes it come to you. There are several instances last year where packages were delivered to my house. Nobody knows where I live at because I keep my residence private. I have a PO box, but my current residence is not public knowledge. And so I had like deliveries come last year, and so I'd be like, "Ooh, I need to go and get some bagels." And I'm like, "No, I'll just wait. I'll wait until like, I really get a hankling or whatever." And then the next day I'd get a big box of bagels. And it was like, oh, my friend sent them to me. She wanted to, she thought about me and she sent them to me. So I got a big box of bagels. Or I was thinking, I need to get this foot circulation thing because sometimes I get underneath my instep. It can get very painful sometimes, unless I have like the proper shoes. So sometimes I'll get these cramps and my foot will cramp up, and so to help with the circulation, to help with so I saw this thing that I thought I need to get something for my feet, and I felt that way for a couple of weeks. I'm like, I need to find something for the bottoms of my feet so that they can help circulate and reduce some of that pressure and reduce some of that. But I didn't really know what to get because I'd never even heard of anything that helps with that. And then I got a random package in the mail of this foot massaging thing that's specifically designed for older folks who have circulation issues in their feet and their legs. And so you put your legs on it, and then it starts to vibrate, and it does this thing where it massages the bottom as well. It does everything that basically needed it to do. It's an ugly ass color because I don't really care for the orange color, but it just arrived in the mail, and it arrived in the mail, and it had a phone number, but it was addressed to my address. And I was like, I didn't order anything. Where did this come from? I called the company and they would never take my call. So I couldn't even report, hey, did you guys send the package by accident? Because I didn't pay for this. And then I reached out to the person or to the number because it had my address, but it had a different phone number. So I reached out to the number that it was supposed to go to, and there was not a good number. And I was like, I don't even know what I'm supposed to do. Like, I received this free thing. I don't just want to take somebody else's, foot thing. I want them to have it, and I'll just send it to them. But it was almost made impossible for me to give it back or to send it. And I was like, okay, well, I guess this is mine. And so that was it. And so I ended up having it. There was another thing where I had Michelle. I was helping her to update some of her recording equipment because she was trying to like up her podcast game. So I sent her a bunch of stuff that I think would help her. I was like, look, I'm going to get you this microphone. I'm going to get you this thing. So I sent her, and it's funny because when I was picking out the microphone to send her to get to purchase, I thought to myself, I would like a lapel mic, or I would like, one of those mics as well, because I really have been wanting one, but a good quality one. I don't want a cheaply one because I want it to have good sound. And I looked at a few of them, but I was like, nah, I'm already spending money. I need to like limit myself because I'm getting kind of out there with how much money I'm spending. So I'm just, and so I bought her the stuff. A couple of days later, I get this package in the mail from California, and it's an Amazon package, and it had a different address, but it was delivered to me. And I was like, okay. And I was like, okay. And so I, again, tried reaching out, looking up the number, calling, whatever, couldn't get a hold of anybody. And so I was like, okay. And when I opened it, it was a lapel microphone, and it was one of the better quality ones. And it was like what, $70 microphone, and it was just, I'm like, I guess I'm supposed to keep this. So I couldn't return it. There was no record of it on Amazon's thing, so they didn't have any record that it existed. And I was like, okay, I guess I'm gonna keep this. And so this is what happens when you align with the giving spirit. You're gifted in return. And I was gifting, Michelle upgrading her equipment so she could use it to her advantage. And I was gifted the same thing in return. That's an example of what I'm talking about. And so that's just one more way that I'm telling you, you can really shift that energy and the trajectory of that. So, all right. So I love you all. Thanks so much for tuning in. I am going to be on vacation next week. So remember, no, we're not doing any lives, and we're not doing any lives next week. So the week after that, I will be back and we will do our lives. Then in our study group as normal. Okay. I love you all. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I will talk to you later. Okay. Bye, everybody.